to welcome you all today. I am Nikki Campo. I am the Innovation Expo Manager for the day and also Program Manager at Innovation Guelph. It is absolutely my pleasure to welcome you all to the panel conversation today on to raise or not to raise. And of course, as I mentioned, please continue to eat throughout the process. That's kind of why we're all here having lunch together. This is like lunch entertainment. I would like to start today off with acknowledging the land on which we are meeting here today, honoring the relationship between the land and the people living and thriving here long before the settlers arrived. So the city of Guelph is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and is home to many First Nations, Inuit and Métis peoples today. And we must be mindful of our collective role as stewards of this land and build awareness of present-day Indigenous culture in our community. Today we acknowledge and offer our respect to the Mississaugas of the Credit, First Nation, and Anishinaabeg peoples on whose traditional territory we are meeting on here today. So a big thank you to all of you for coming. We hope you enjoy your lunch and the conversations that you're going to be witnessing here shortly. The conversation is moderated by Joe Panavan. And of course, we have Mark and Brittany and Janice here. If you would like to read about their histories, what their companies are, who they all are, you have the nice little pamphlet on your tables. This goes over all of their backgrounds a little bit more in depth than they're going to get here today. How this works is they're each going to take about 2 to 3 minutes to kind of give you a little bit of their perspective on raising or not raising and what their experience with that is. And then Joe is going to work with them and have a conversation. And by about dessert time, we should be working at opening up the floor to some questions. So if you have any particular questions for any of the panelists, we will absolutely reach out to the crowd for that. But I'm going to be quiet now. It's all up to you guys. Have fun.
So did you want me to introduce myself as well?
Introduce yourself a tiny bit. Tell us a little bit about what you think, and then
Sure. So I'm absolutely delighted and honored to be here. I love working with entrepreneurs. I love the whole founder dynamic and energy because it's the future of our country. And we're really rookies at this. I mean, we were hewers of wood and drawers of water for a long time, and that's entrepreneurial. But what's happened in the last 10 years is an enormous sea change in the country. When I was launching companies like GT Global, Fidelity, Synergy, and selling them to other players in the market, there wasn't a capital, there wasn't a venture capital industry, there wasn't really access to capital in the country. It really only started in 2010. And it's so unique right now. It's so different. We're really, really young at this in Canada. If you look at Silicon Valley that have been at it for 30 to 40 years in any meaningful way, you know, some of their bigger funds are on Fund 20, Fund 22, Fund 25, you know, at Andreessen Horowitz or Charles River. Whereas in Canada, most of the funds, Georgian maybe is the oldest, it's got over $1 billion, and they've only been at it, I think, 11 years, right? So it's I think they're on Fund 3. And so that's our granddaddy, right? So this is all very new. It's all very real, it's all very important. And the last company that I stepped off the board of and stepped in to run for a couple of years, which I do sometimes because I've been kind of a retired guy for, I guess, since 2010, after finishing my turnaround of Asante Wealth Management. So occasionally, I'll come off a board, go in and see if I can add value in some meaningful way, and then replace myself with somebody more permanent. And so that organization, which launched in 2010, at the very beginning, of the genesis of startups in technology in Canada, and out of Next Canada was born, you know, Creative Destruction Lab and a bunch of others. But you know, we're launching 70 to 100 companies a year out of there now, and that's powerful. That's important, I think, for the country. And so I've kind of made it my role, my mission, to help startups and help founders where I can, where I think I can add significant value. So a long-winded way of saying I am really, really excited to be here. We've got a lot of really important questions to answer, and hopefully we'll answer as many as possible. And if we don't, that's where you guys are going to step in at dessert time and say, okay, you totally missed it, Canavan. You could have done way better. Think of this question. So I'll pass it to you.
Are we doing intros?
Yeah.
Is that what? I'm Janice. So that's Janice with a J to make it easier to remember. And I guess to contextualize it, I started the entrepreneurship journey 7 to 10 years ago. And at that time, everything was a first. Like when I did engineering at Waterloo, Communitech didn't exist. Velocity didn't exist. There was no startup ecosystem. So like I was part of a lot of the first round of a lot of incubators in Toronto and the Markham area. And so, yeah, and I guess if I am the founder and CEO of a certification program, so very much like the organic certification for food. My company is the clean, non-toxic certification for skincare and beauty products. Oh, I love that phrase, thank you. And then my second startup was like every woman here is like, oh, that's interesting. We're not changing our eyeliner unless we know it works, right? So, but how do we know what works in the clean, non-toxic sector? So then I created a second startup, like a TripAdvisor for non-toxic organic skincare, so we can see what others have thought of these indie niche brands. But the pandemic, I had to close shop. At that time, like we were on a high, and I self-funded the company for 3 years. Alibaba had a global pitch competition. I came in top 5 in Canada, top 40 in the world, and they were going to send all 40 of us to pitch in Hong Kong for $1 million. Pandemic happened. And that given the changes in the pandemic and my team, there was no way for me to continue, so I closed shop. So during the pandemic, I've been working on the certification company again, growing that.
Cool. Mark?
Gotcha, yeah. So my name is Marc Lafleur. For those of you that don't know me, I guess my claim to fame would be co-founding and being the CEO of TrueLocal. We were acquired in 2020. And you know, I came from pretty much having holes in my shoes, small high school. I was actually the only black kid in my high school. And we got to university, and that was the first time I ever even knew that business was an option. And I come from the world that if you go and raise money, you're successful. I remember reading about the companies at Waterloo that would go and raise $1 million, and I thought they'd already made it. And of course, that is a rude awakening when you realize how it actually operates. So we built TrueLocal to 60 employees, $20 million with $940,000 in funding. We did everything from angels. We did everything well and everything poorly. We did the whole thing with angels. We did Dragon's Den. We did debt. We did VCs. We did this entire process. So my understanding of it is really more of a when, not a what. It's not really necessarily that there's a right type of funding. It's more about what stage is your business at, what matters to you, what are the things that you need, and then finding funding from that. So yeah, I'm super excited to be chatting here. We got some amazing panelists. Very, very excited, and that's my background.
Hi everyone, I'm Brittany Charlton. I'm the founder of O Foods. We make allergen-friendly snacks that are vegan and gluten-free. So we focus on creating a world where inclusive snacking is possible, just taking your regular products that you have on the market and turning them into products that are completely like allergen-friendly, vegan, gluten-free. You can find our products in about 1,800 retailers. So we're in Walmart, Bed Bath & Beyond, Metro locations, Sobeys, and then just expanding across Canada. And then in 2023, we'll be launching and going into the US.
Okay, so the question of the day is to raise or not to raise, but I think where we want to probably start is cap structure and cap table, right? Because, I mean, that really helps define who we are as a company. And then, do we want to go out and raise money? And if so, how? Do we want to do preferreds? Do we want to use debt? Do we want to raise equity? Because it changes the dynamic of your company, right? I mean, you're bringing on partners. You're bringing on somebody that you need to stand by you if you make this decision well through all market cycles. And some cycles are fantastic, and some cycles are brutal and punishing. And when you go through those brutal, punishing ones, if you've chosen your partners well, they'll help manage through that process. If you've chosen those partners poorly, they will take a hammer and really do some serious damage to your business, and it can go terribly, terribly wrong, and you'll have lots of sleepless nights. So with that, let's talk a bit about the structure of your businesses, and then we'll talk about, how do we go forward from that, and what form of capital do we raise?
I'll start. With a certification company, I had to win a loan, right? Because that's how scarce money is. I had to win a $50,000. I won a loan from Futurepreneur and BDC, $50,000, and I was able to actually just use that. So I own 100% of the company today. Yeah.
That's amazing. Mark?
Yeah, my opinion is keep it as simple as possible. Once you guys get to VC and institution, if you have a messy cap table early on, it's just a red flag, and it's going to take a lot of restructuring, and then they get a lot more leverage to say, well, as we restructure, we're going to do X, Y, Z. So once again, the context here is when I started True Local, I'd never even read a business book. Like, my degree was in health. I just was a really bad employee, so I wanted to start my own thing. So luckily, of course, I remember coming out the gate and thinking that all I got to do is put like a one-page business plan together, pick up the phone, and people start funding. And once again, that wasn't the case. And through a series of no's from institutions, like from analysts, actually, I couldn't even get to talk to partners, that led me into angels. And I didn't even know what angels were prior to VCs. So the way our company was structured was me and my co-founder, a bunch of angels, and then that's actually how it ended once we were acquired. So we went through that whole thing, and like I said, I think a lot of no's, and a lot of people probably have experienced this, but as a founder, you're a professional problem solver. So when you get no in one area, you go somewhere else. And it's kind of funny how, looking back on it, had we taken those deals early on when we didn't know how the world worked, we didn't know how financing worked, we didn't know about preferred shares and board seats and liquidation preferences, we would have just signed, we would have saw the check and been like, okay, cool, take it and run. And it would have been disastrous. So that's my biggest thing. Keep it simple, especially in the early days. And that's what led us to where we were at.
Yeah, I'd say for us, we did a lot of grants. We ended up getting a loan. I bootstrapped the company myself. And then this year is when we actually took on partners. We ended up going to Startup Fest, which is like a tech conference, and then winning $100,000, having a BDC match the funds, and then having another investment group that we spoke to earlier on in the year who said, go get a lead and we'll invest, ended up taking the lead anyway, so that was really cool. But I'd say for us, it was just like, if you can bootstrap, I would do that for as much as you can, depending on what kind of business you're trying to grow and scale. But then also, once it starts to impede your growth, then go out and look for the capital that you need, whether it be loans or going to an investor.
So it sounds like right off the hop, not only have we got real entrepreneurs, but real smart entrepreneurs that are taking non-dilutive funding, right? I mean, there's nothing better than finding somebody who's going to make a gift, whether it's through a contest or a bank that is trying to entice business for the longer term or for the betterment of the country. Talk a bit about your decision to take non-dilutive versus how you might think about dilutive. Maybe we'll start back with you, Brittany, because you were on a roll.
Yeah. I'd say looking back, I think we could have grown a lot quicker had we taken investments quicker, sooner. And so I think, but then I also know that I don't think I would have known what to do with that money either had I received it early on. And just knowing what I know now about the landscape of retail and our business and how we're growing it, I'm able to navigate a lot quicker. So I think with the pandemic happening and then winning, we ended up winning through True Local. They had a grant program, and that was amazing for us. And that was $10,000 that we ended up getting into the company, being able to launch another product. And that was our edible cookie dough, and then kind of scaling from there. But I'd say for us, I only knew what to do with the capital, probably 2020 when everything hit the fan, and I was like, okay, I'm losing retailers. I need to figure out how I'm going to navigate this, and how are we going to pivot in the market? And then that's when I was really okay, I know what to do with the capital and how to move through it.
So why would you lose retailers? What was happening inside the business?
For us, we are our first SKU, which is our bites. they're at checkouts. So if you're no longer going into the store anymore because everyone was ordering online, then you miss out on the consumer who's going through the checkout aisles. Now our edible cookie doughs are in the fridge, so it's an item that you would actually put on your list of like, okay, I need to go pick this up at the store. Whereas our snacking bites, our smaller ones, you would go through checkout and pick them up as impulse. And that did really, really well for us. And so that's still the case, but now we have our bigger sizes that we're launching, and that's something that you would put on your, your list, and then maybe the small ones are just grab and go kind of thing. But yeah, back to your question, I think it just really depends on like the business you're growing. If you're trying to grow fast and exit in a certain amount of time, then I would suggest that you look at your options. But then also it depends. Like if you're profitable, you're able to keep going by yourself, then go by yourself. But then if you're not,
So when you were looking for funding, for grant funding, let's start
Yep.
with the non-dilutive stuff. Did you do it on your own? Did you have a service or somebody that was an expert in allocating or accessing capital? Or was that just you trying to Google, where can I find free money?
yeah, Google, where can I find free money? And then, I think there are people you can pay.
Yeah.
But yeah, Googling that, and then also connecting with other founders. So many other people were like, hey, I found it. Like they have grant people. So I was like, hey, where do you find these grants? And then they would tell me, and then I wouldn't have to pay for a grant person.
Okay, I'm just going to say one thing that I think should really, I want everybody to recognize this, whether it's in Silicon Valley or in Boston or here or Startup Fest in Montreal. One of the things that I have found is entrepreneurs feel such gratitude, feel such an overwhelming sense of somebody believed in me and gave me my shot, gave me the opportunity to take one, add another one, and get that to equal 4 or 5 or 6. Most times, entrepreneurs will go out of their way to do whatever they can to answer questions, to help you, to support you, as long as they're not competitors. And I do think that that's so phenomenal about this, around this community. Like if you go to CDL, what Ajay Agarwal has built there is brilliant because he's accessed other entrepreneurs to come in and coach and guide and help all the startups. And I think that's a very big part of our community. So the fact that you were able to get good advice from other entrepreneurs, people who've had some experience, I do think that that's something that really needs to be said in this room, because there's no better source of wisdom than other people who've gone through it before. So that's awesome. It's great. And you were able to get it. And then maybe a little bit more about, okay, you got the non-dilutive stuff, and did you think about equity versus debt versus preferreds, and where did it all balance out for you?
Yeah. So I think it was only this year that we started to look for funding. And I, like many other people, I thought kind of like what you said, where you just click a button, you message people, and you're gonna get a bunch of people being like, yeah, let's go. And that's not the case. So start early. Yeah, I started looking into that, just looking into different options for us, whether it be a loan from BDC or looking into equity. But then we actually ended up going with safes. So that was completely different for us, where that helped us right now just because of where we are in the business and just not putting a valuation on it right now and letting it play out. So yeah, I would say it really just depends, like I said earlier, on what business you're building and what your goal is. If your goal is to get out in 5 years and you have a vision for that, then go ahead
The
and.
investors in your safe are angels then? It's
Yes.
beyond friends and family?
Yeah, no
Next level
friends.
up, okay.
Yeah, and that's another thing is I didn't really have friends and family I could go to and be
Sure.
like, hey, can I have X amount of dollars, right? So I think that's another big thing of people are like, well, go to your friends and family first, but it's if you don't really have anyone that you can go to and you're
Yeah.
just relying on yourself, there's only so much growth that you can do on your own.
100%. As a kid from Scarborough, I know. Mark, you were talking a bit about that too. I mean, friends and family, was that an option for you? Or it sounded like, I had holes in my shoes, so not really.
Yeah, hard no on that. And I think that's the thing that, I was always driven by, the things that, people tell you not to be driven by. Like I had a chip on my shoulder. I wanted to prove people wrong. We came from nothing. So it was like really like kind of anger at the world, which I think is a really powerful force of fuel, but you can only do it for you do that past too long and you're going down a spiral. But friends and family wasn't an option. The whole thing, I wanted to touch on something I actually said though, because the idea of, especially with institutions, it's all in the relationship building. So to the same point of trying to just go and raise money right away, actually it's not that it's that far away from, hey, now I'm raising, are you interested in investing? That actually can happen if you've built the relationship early on. So I actually feel the whole idea when they talk about to founders about always be raising, the truth really is that even if you've just closed a round, you should be going to every VC, every investor and saying, hey, look, we just closed this amazing round. I'm going to keep you in the loop on what we do next. Because by the time, whether your runway runs out after 12 months or so, you can now pick that conversation back up, or you can even set milestones, right? The whole idea, go do this and then we will fund you. Yep. If you don't strategize that properly, you end up on a hamster wheel of if you reach out and you did this one thing for a specific investor, right? And you try to go bring that to a new investor, the new investor is going to say, well, do one more thing. And you get on this perpetual hamster wheel. So for us, we didn't do any non-dilutive funding in the early days. We just went straight after angels because once again, we thought that raising money was the win. We went into this very blind. It was figure it all out on the way, jump off the cliff, build a plan on the way down kind of thing. And I think the thing that I know now looking back on it, and to your point as well, is that it all depends on what type of business. Okay, so there's no right or wrong answers. VCs serve a purpose, angels serve a purpose, debt serves a purpose, equity crowdfunding serves a purpose, and it's just about deciding when you want to deploy those strategies, but it's also understanding those strategies deeply. I see it too many times now. I'm definitely a pro angel. I'm very much, if you can early on get angel investment, if you're going to do some sort of dilutive funding. But that's not to say that VCs are this sort of big evil demon that people make them out to be. It's that they serve a different purpose. If you are in a winner-take-all market, or you need heavy R&D, or you need enterprise sales, and you're just starting out, it probably makes sense to approach a VC and say, hey, look, I need the money, but what I really need is I need my foot in the door. I need to be at these events. I need to be talking to the right people, and that's value that they can bring. So the thing where I start seeing a lot of funding break down is that people are using the wrong strategy for their business. So for us, in terms of non-dilutive funding, we got a loan that we never used from BDC, and everybody ripped my head off for that. Why would you do that? Why would you? We didn't need the money. And my whole process was that I look at a loan from the BDC as a expensive insurance policy. Do you know how much easier it is to go into investor meetings when you don't need to raise? And you can now say, hey, listen, we're good, but we've got money in the bank, we've got this loan, we've got X, Y, Z. Are you guys interested in participating? It's very different than when you've got 6 weeks worth of money left and you're saying, hey, look, I need a hug, right? So that's a big part of it. And even with the whole thing when we were acquired, so I forget the specifics, but it was a 3-year BDC deal, and we were acquired a year after that. So we paid massive fees on it. But I truly believe we wouldn't have been acquired if we didn't have that sort of war chest to fall back on. So there's just so many different strategies to use. It's not right or wrong. In the early days, if you're a generic business, my opinion would be push dilutive funding as far as you can, because that growth after year one, I remember, the early people we were pitching, which thank God they said no, but we were going there being 10% for $1 million valuation. That was just the go-to. And of course, by the time a year was done, the valuation had jumped because we actually had some business. And had we taken those deals early on, it would have put us in a really, really tough spot. So my preferred way of approaching things for a generic business is, get a little something off the ground. If you need dilutive funding, go to angels. And if you can get non-dilutive, to your point, Google, how do you get free money from a business? And there is surprisingly a lot of options, but it is hard to find. And I will say that to anybody in the room who's running programs, it's confusing out there. It's tough. We don't know where to go. We don't, how to find free money on Google. Once you refine it to I'm running this business and I'm in this space and I would love government funding, something a little bit more specific, it's still tough. This is out of date, that's out of date, go through these 8 portals. And then to your point, we had someone, and once again, in the early days, it's everyone wears all hats. And the most organized individual we had were listen, we need you to scrape everything to find every possible grant out there, expired or not. And then we started just going down the list to see what we would qualify for. So it's out there. I always say it's simple, not easy. Find it, find the grants. Okay, cool. Executing on filling out the applications and going through the entire process, not necessarily easy, but it isn't it's hard to figure out how to get funding. You can do it when you do the research.
Yeah.
and we'll get to this, but there is a right time to
Yeah.
access certain investors, angels versus VCs versus debt is way long in the future, in my mind, for a business with no EBITDA.
Yeah.
Scares me. But I wanted to get back to Janice. Talk a little bit about your structure and how you're feeling right
I
now.
wish I knew, like, when you tell the story in hindsight, it's like, oh, I got this loan and I bootstrapped. It's like, I got that loan and I bootstrapped, but I hustled, right? I hustled to be part of incubators, and incubators, I hustled to pitch. So there was a lot of time spent on pitching and prepping just to get into incubators, pitching to investors. But I think what I wish I had known then is that the nature of my business was quite different. It's a B2B to C. How many people are looking for certification companies versus a brand, a product base? It's just not a model that people or investors or angels or funds are looking for. And so I spent so much time pitching to the wrong groups of people. I would be pitching to people where they're like, oh, for one of the companies, what's your exit strategy? I'm like, oh, having Sephora acquire me. And then, the men in the group were like, oh, what's Sephora? Right? And when I only pitch to mainly men, and if they don't know Sephora, that there's a huge disconnect with what problem I'm solving and for whom, and how much value add, right, there is to my company. So is the money smart?
Right. That is one of the most important things said so far today. Smart money versus any money. And the other thing I would say, and I think Brittany was touching on it, is where to access the capital. I would always, there's lots of money, but money that understands your industry, your vertical. So I would only pitch to people that get my vertical. Like bringing somebody that doesn't understand access to retail, that's not useful, right? And so you need people that understand the vertical, that understand the growth level of your business and what the life cycle of your business might be, how you're going to create value, and then identifying, okay, who is that right investor? And if they're angels, it's awesome in your case if you could get somebody that had been the ex-CEO of Estee Lauder to put in X and become an investor in your organization, because
But I would still argue, because there's still product and going into product development and retailer and brand, that's still very different than certification program that targets to very niche, indie, small, tiny brands.
yeah. The only reason I thought of that is I know the person who happened to do that, and I'm like, could he bring wisdom? Could he help you understand the mindset of the brand?
Right.
And so you've got hundreds and hundreds of brands that already want your certification.
Correct.
Does that person, so that's the other thing, the smart money aspect, and what that really means is it money that understands your business model, can add value, can introduce you, answer questions for you? That's the best money. I mean, and they're good people, right? They're people who've made money before. They're even better if they're entrepreneurs who failed and succeeded, because then they understand how bad things can be. I mean, and if they can introduce you to people, help you think about strategy, help you think about the bigger picture for the opportunities for your company, that's the big deal, right? Because the other thing that people forget is as soon as you bring on an investor, as an angel or as a VC, one of the first questions they have is, how do we exit? I'm going to give you $1 million. How do I get it out? And you're like, oh, I'm not selling. This is my business for the next 30 years. They're like, yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I don't have a 30-year timeline. And so that's another issue, because if this is a lifestyle business, if this is something that you're going to continue to grow for the next few decades, that's a very different type of investor that's coming along. So maybe, Mark, do you want to talk a bit about that? Because you've had your raises and you've had your exit. How did that play out, and what would you do, maybe think about differently?
Yeah, one thing I want to touch on, though, on the smart money idea is that everybody, when they're sitting around having a conversation about it, can conceptualize, go after smart money, go after the money that fits what you're looking for. But the problem is, think of any performance sport. What happens when you are under pressure and you're scarce and you're stressed? You start to choke. And the way I look at it with first-time founders is they are scared, they're desperate, and they don't actually understand the game the way that they should. So what ends up happening is they jump on any check that comes their way. And it's so sad to see how many amazing businesses, great founders that have an absolutely amazing product that fail because they took on the wrong investors early on. And to your point, once again, let's say there are so many alignment things that come up when it comes to taking money. I wish that more first-time founders actually realize that, and maybe I'm speaking for myself here, but money is not hard to come by. There is a lot of money, even today with the current market, there is a lot of money you can get, but people don't know how to navigate that, they don't know how to have the conversation, so they take the first check that's coming their way.
And
so
why is that?
I think that, first of all, if you're a first-time founder, you haven't done it before. You are going into it with the current knowledge you have, and then you're going into it with the network of people that you have access to that can help mentor you along the way. And a lot of the times, even if you have a network, a lot of people don't. Even if you have a network, some people just don't ask the right questions. And one thing I will say, don't take this personally, but I always say that first-time founders shouldn't take investment advice from investors. First-time founders should take investment advice from first-time founders, or founders who have actually gone out and done it, because I've seen it so many times. I've been on the other side where I'll literally be watching this, founder ask an investor for advice, and this investor is not giving this founder advice. He is giving him they're implanting this sort of idea on how they can get a better deal on better terms. Like, well, listen, you shouldn't really go after that. What you should do is go for this. And I don't know if it's something that people do on purpose or if it's just subconscious. So for me, I think that, there's a lot of things in play. The fact that as a first-time founder, you're probably putting a lot on the line. You've maybe done a friends and family round. You've maybe quit your job. Maybe you've hired friends. And if you fail, it's really a huge stain on everything that's going on, and you let people down. So you're in this scarce mindset, which makes it difficult to make decisions. And then as a first-time founder, once again, if you're coming from the streets or you're coming from somewhere that doesn't have access to a network, you just aren't able to get that sort of guidance or advice. So those are the kind of things on smart money. And I think it's specific for first-time founders. I think once you've gone and done it, you understand. Like, you understand the value that money can bring. You understand that money arguably is a commodity, but the person behind it is where the value add comes in. So for us, all of this, by the way, is great to talk about in hindsight. I knew none of this going through it. And
this is where I wanted to get to. And you didn't offend me because I was a first-time founder, and I had to go and raise money. I had to go beg for money from all kinds of really, really wealthy, super smart people that I wasn't sure why they would want to be in business with me, but they ultimately chose to do it, and I was ridiculously grateful.
Yeah.
The biggest problem that I see is founders get so focused on their business that they miss the bigger picture. You need to, and I don't usually say that with definitiveness like this, because entrepreneurship is so fluid, but the one thing that founders need to do, if they can't go 10 years, take a vision. Go and do a vision board for 5 years, 3 years, 1 year, 6 months, and really get a sense of what this business could become and who you want along for the ride. Because when you're making your selection, when you're choosing an angel or a venture capital firm to be your partner, you're getting married. It's marriage. It's sometimes worse than marriage, because marriage can sometimes be, a lot more forgiveness. Venture capital is not known for forgiveness.
I thought you were going to say because there's sex. Right?
No!
Right?
Not in 2022. I can't even say that word. Who knows where that's going to go? But good for you for stepping out there.
So in 2022, we can't say that you can have sex in marriage.
You're getting married.
I'm still eggshells near woke people. I don't know. I'm very cautious. But that word aside, I really do think it comes down to, and this is something I used to do every 3 to 6 months, is I would go away. And I would spend 3 days on my own, either actually at Langdon Hall, not far from here, and I wouldn't leave my room. Or if I did, it would be to go to the gym or go for a hike and think about all the things I'd written or meditated on or what have you. And I would always think about, okay, am I still on track? Is this still a crystal clear vision? Is the skeletal of my plan still the right strategy? And even if I veer, like even if you veer with your product selection and you go beyond what you originally envisioned, you're still on track to build a great company in your vertical. That's one of the things, and I just recently had this conversation 48 hours ago with a founder, and it was the one thing. He's just like, I just never thought of it. And yet, he was a very bright, successful person. And so I really do think doing that work, because it is so much heavy lifting as an entrepreneur. There's so much pressure. There's so much stress. There's a lot of sleepless, like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning where you're waking up going, oh my gosh, how am I going to get to payroll? Am I going to land Walmart? Am I going to whatever, right? There's so many things that people don't take that time. And I think if you do take that time, if you paint a beautiful picture of what success, perfection could look like, even if you don't get to perfection, gosh, you get darn close.
The thing with that, though, is that when you're going on that nice walk and you're taking those 3 days, it's easy to have the plan laid out. And of course, it's not that the plan is 100%, but it's like the North Star. The thing that I think that happens with this idea of smart money is that when you start applying pressure, and pressure can be so many different things. It could be physical pressure, it could be mental pressure, it could be emotional pressure, it could be financial pressure. To first-time founders specifically, they start to crack in certain areas. And that's where I see the desperation come in. So to your point, the idea of finding the smart money, what I say now, which I most certainly didn't know back then, is just going through it, is that you have to have the utmost transparency with your investors in terms of the exit strategy. And the reason I say that is because early on, investors will have this idea, first-time founders, which I would say a majority of first-time founders want to go through an exit. They think they're going to exit their company in 1 year. They want to be rich. They want to make money. They want to do that. And that's a huge part of why people go into business. And it's the truth. And I think that a lot of people will go to investors and say, well, I want to build this 5-year, 10-year plan. We want to go to 100 million, but really they'll take a $5 million check. And that to me is the first sign of desperation. That to me is where you are telling something that your investor wants to hear so that you can close the deal.
So this is where I think, again, I love your passion for this, but it's not entirely on the mark. And the reason I say that is, I'm coaching 6 CEOs right now.
Okay.
And every one of them has that vision boarding. They've done that
Those
work.
are $100 million CEOs.
No, they're not.
I thought you
Oh,
said-
no. Some of them have become that.
Okay.
But from day one, they were not. And some of them still are not. A lot of them became that, but they started with that visioning work. And that led to a number of things. And these are things that I think are really important for all entrepreneurs. Who are the people that you have on your advisory board? Because smart money is attracted to smart people. So when we were talking about Michael Katchen as an example, they looked at the people around Michael, and because I'd built 6 different companies, Sam had built a bunch of companies, his most recent one, Purpose, Brent Bellsberg, and all these other people looked at that and they're like, holy smokes, if he can attract those people, what can he do? And then they looked at his team, and they were all incredibly talented people that he had hand-selected, and he built something really special in terms of the culture and the team. And this is the same with Cap Intel, James Rockwood, who I'm having these discussions with today. It's who are your advisors? Who is your team? Who are you attracting as the right angel investors, as the right venture investors, so that you never put yourself in harm's way? And having thought about it 5 years out, 3 years out, 1 year out, they don't get blindsided. They don't get pressured into taking the first check. They've actually thought through it. And that's what a coach is supposed to do, is help you see a future that you design for yourself. And again, even if you shift, even if you veer, at least you've set that intention out there. And if it's been realistic, I think that's really good. So, Brittany, talk a bit about.
Sorry, back to what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I think smart money is like different things. It could be like BDC doesn't necessarily know about my retail landscape. They deal with tech, but they're an institution that holds weight as well that can get me further and other money for people to believe in me. So I think there's like different smart money that kind of goes in. It does they don't necessarily need to know exactly how I sell to retailer, what retailers it makes sense or have connections for me, but they can bring in other angel investors that are like, okay, well, you have BDC sitting there. That's like a great bank to have on there. Let's do business with you.
And one of the things that Janice mentioned earlier about talking to different accelerators, talking to incubators, talking to network organizations like C100 down in the Valley, they give you, not only do they help educate you, and they give you access to mentorship in some cases, they also give you a network access that is unparalleled. Like what those folks in California have created out of the C100, which was a bunch of young Canadian startup people, and they built this organization to give Canadian startups access initially into the valley, which they otherwise might be afraid to go after. And now they have access, and they have multiple programs where you go down, you spend time, and one of the companies that I was working with now has moved there, right? Because not only did he get access, and not only did he ultimately get investment from, he just decided he wanted to be down on Sand Hill Road. And so that's the other thing that you can do, is continue to build your network. And you, with a book, you're going to go out on a speaking tour probably, you're going to have access to a number of different things. So if you went back in to go back and found another company, that network is going to be an unparalleled one. Whereas Brittany, who's still building the capital, still building her company, still creating her vision, I mean, it's going to be a bit more time.
That's where I think the idea of the when comes in, though, right? So that's kind of to your point, the idea of the vision board and all that, then to the point where I'm at, where it's like, okay, we just went through an exit, and then to the point with someone like Brittany, where it's like, we're just getting started. It's not that there's a right or a wrong way to look at it. It's literally, when do you apply what? So to your point, I think that if we're talking about, we want to go raise $20 million from an institution, who are your advisors? What is your long-term plan? What is the market outlook? Who is supporting this? But just to the point that I was saying before is like, who are we talking to? Or who are we talking for? And whenever I speak from something, I'm always talking from a first-time founder perspective. And to me, as a first-time founder, I don't got no board of advisors. Nobody believes in me. Nobody knows who I am. I barely have a product off the ground. And I now have 6 weeks of runway left, or no money. Where am I going to go? Like, I am now in a position where I feel the pressure all the way around, and I'm going to jump on the first check. It's not the right thing to do. I'm not saying that's what you should do, but there's a difference between what you should do and what's actually happening out there.
And maybe I'm just in a position, because I am coaching these founders, that's the first thing I tell them, is who do you know that you can put around you that gives you all of that wisdom, that intellectual capital, and that potential access that can help you make fewer mistakes and put you on a path to success. And I've found the founders who've done that ultimately have that beautiful growth trajectory, because they've done all the heavy lifting early and they've made less mistakes. Now, in fairness, they've got people coaching them, or they've come through an accelerator, or they've come through some kind of a mentorship program. And all of those things are designed to give you that built-in coaching. So CDL has that, or Next, as an example, one of the things that we would do is we would not only give you access to profs from Harvard and MIT and Stanford and U of T, we'd also give you C-suite mentors. And then we would also give you access to EY to do the financial structuring of your platform. And then we'd give you access to Osler's to help you with the legal structuring. And they would put up their hands to do that because A, they felt that that was their duty and philanthropy as a commercial organization, and B, or secondly, there might be an opportunity if this company really takes off and flies that they'll continue to use our legal services or our accounting services or what have you. And then obviously we would give people access to the network because our board is rich with very successful people. So I think it's mostly who you surround yourself with on your path, on your journey. And that's what I always tell first-time founders. Now, again, if they're 20 years old and they're dropping out of school to do it, it might be a little bit different. But even if you're dropping out of, let's say, Waterloo, there's that Velocity, right? You could go. A buddy of mine started Velocity, and because he didn't have that when he was at Waterloo studying mechatronics, and so he basically built that so people could have access to something that he didn't. And now it's there. And then it was run by a guy named Jay Shaw, who was another engineer from Waterloo, who, with another guy, Mike, basically built a company while they were at school and sold it to Google for $35 million. So again, coming back to that beautiful circular aspect of entrepreneurship, wanting to give back. Here's a 20-something-year-old kid who said, I'm going to donate $1 million to create an accelerator at my alma mater that he didn't actually ultimately graduate from, to go and build his thing. And I think it's so powerful. So imagine if you are that startup person and you have access to an incubator or an accelerator or some kind of a program, a C100 or a CDL or whatever, they're all there.
Innovation Guelph.
Innovation Guelph. But that's what I mean. There are so many resources that are here to help you get from A to B to C and make 1 + 1 = 5. Now, I guess, at this point, can we maybe ask you guys to ask some questions? Because I feel like,
Just have a few minutes left, so it's perfect.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
please.
Hi, thanks, everybody. I echo Mark, thank you for when the startup founder, it is hard, right? It is hard, and I echo 100%. Innovation Guelph, I'm with Business Center Guelph Wellington. We're one of 47 small business centers across Ontario, and that's what we do. We are your advisory board. We're helping you with that 30, 60, 90 days. Same with Innovation Guelph. I mean, that's the plethora of support. There's accelerators, there's small business centers, there's lots of people out there. That's our job, right? So thank you for echoing that, because you're right, not everybody has that same access.
No, it's great to hear.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, first, I want to congratulate the panel. This is just for me, from an African-American perspective. I'm originally from the U.S. I've been in Canada about 3 years. I work for the Canadian Black Chamber of Commerce. So one, I want to applaud you on the diversity. A lot of times when we act intentionally on inclusion, we don't get the kudos for that. And that's good, actually, because that means you're doing it without the kudos, right? So this is just neat to see someone of Asian descent, African descent, and we've got Europeans represented. Like, this is dope. Like, you don't understand how good this feels, especially when you're the only black in a crowd and the people that are presenting are diverse. That's what you should be doing. This is what it should look like. So this is cool. So thank you for that. First off, I want to talk to all of you after, because you are tripping me out, because our chamber is creating a certification program that's never been done in Canada for black entrepreneurs, and it's scary. So definitely want to talk to you about that, because there's a bunch of minefields, so I feel you. I've got a 100-acre farm in Georgia.
Yeah.
So definitely want to talk to you.
All right. Anytime we get out to Atlanta, let me know.
We're working on a retail program for black entrepreneurs in partnership with Walmart. It's kind of in the preliminary stages, so I definitely want to talk to you. There's some cool stuff that they're doing behind the scenes that no one knows about that speaks to some of the issues that you're talking about, product placement. I just got off a conversation with one of our entrepreneurs with Sephora. They don't know what they don't know. And it's scaring us because we don't know either, because it's changing. They've got to buy shelf space, and then they got to worry about inventory management and all that. It's just a myriad of crap that the big box stores, which is what we want to be, have our stuff everywhere, but dealing with them is not easy, right? Especially from a funding standpoint. But as a coach, I love what you said as far as the vision piece. I had an $8 million company with no values. We had no core values. We just wanted to make money, right? And when we ran up against the recession, our first funding was from an angel, $100,000. That was beautiful, and it was debt. We did a debt instrument. No one was explaining this stuff to us, and that's the piece that I love what you're talking about, the vision piece.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have vision of values, it's going to be tough. And I wanted to talk about the core values and how each of you kind of created your core values, because that is the one thing that I see I've talked to 700 entrepreneurs this year. Very few, maybe 10, have their core values and talk about it. And I didn't have them. I had 2 multi-million-dollar companies and never had core values. We just wanted to make money. And I'm starting to preach that, because it's too tough if you don't have those core values. But I never hear advisors talking about core values. I hear vision and mission, but I never hear core values. So I wanted
If
to
you want, I can give you a 30-second answer on how we did it at True Local.
love it.
So our whole thing was that, your core values, your mission, whatever you want to call it, is what you do, is not what you say. Everybody tries to come up with these words and these statements and these phrases to describe what it is, and then they try to live up to that. That's the wrong way to do it. Be a company, exist as a company, just, hang around, do what you need to do, and then what you can do is start putting names and labels to the things that you're actually doing. So the way that we did it was that we did a book club, which sounds lame, but we were doing a book club for a year, 1 book a month, and then the idea, all business books, so I can give you guys a list or whatever, but we go through the whole thing, and then we take out 1 sentence, 1 word, 1 image, whatever it was, the biggest core learning that we learned from that book that represented what we were trying to do or what we were doing. And at the end of the year, we would have 12, and we would go through it and say, not which ones do we want to live up to, but which one out of these 12, pick 5 that actually put into words what we are doing. And that became our core, So that was the only way I could look at it, where it was like, how do we, instead of imposing these words onto us, let's be us and then find the words that match what we do. And that worked quite well.
So do you think new values come out of your growth?
Yeah, well, for sure. It's always, my whole thing on business is it's not a what, it's a when. When are you using what strategy? So for what was working for us when we were doing $2 million was very different than when it was at $15 million, and the whole company had to change, and the values had to change with it. So we kept the book club going yearly, and we would knock things off and put them back up, and you get the core contributors too that come out to
We
that.
have to wrap up.
Sorry.
Can we
Sorry.
let one other person ask a question, and then I'm going to wrap up.
Yeah, we'll talk.
So, as a immigrant, I don't have big network, right? And I understand the value of people that supports you and advisors and stuff like that. So I've been through multiple events and angel groups where I felt that I'm entertaining them rather than actually having a conversation. So when I went to US market and started working on the US, I've got into DFA Accelerator, I've got into Thrive Accelerator, and I see people listen to what I'm talking about. They try to, they try to figure out what values I bring to this market or that market. So my question, do we all talk about these angel investors and investment ecosystem in Ontario? Does it really make sense to spend that lawyer?
That's your investor right there.
That's actually a
Got a check for
lawyer who is working on a term sheet for our investment in the US. Right, so I spend so much time trying to find investors, and just to check, right? Okay, I spent like 2 years in this journey, like 2 years after COVID, I tried to approach another angel group in Ontario, and I got the same answer, like, okay, all this kind of feedback, work a little bit on this side, work a little bit on that side. Man, we are not talking about values, like, what are we, like, are you even interested in that, right? Do you even understand what I'm talking about? Is this anything that I can improve in my pitch, right? Rather than just fine-tuning, change black to white
Right.
and stuff like that. So it's very uphill kind of journey and battle. Not the battle, but discouraging.
So the problem is
Reaching out to local
VCs
investors.
look at 400 decks a year, and they'll choose 2, 3, 4, or 5 to invest in. So if you do the math on that, they're seeing a ton. Angels aren't that big a number, but they're seeing 100. Like a good angel, somebody who's built some wealth, they've seen lots and lots and lots of decks, and they know what they're looking for. And my thing would always be, give me a quick no. I'm okay with a quick no. I just don't want you to drag it out if you have no intention whatsoever. And you'll find, when you find the right angel or you find the right VC, you'll see so many similarities to your personality type, their belief and understanding of your mission and vision, and it just sort of lines up. And again, maybe that sounds, too...
Very rosy.
It does sound rosy, but when you find the right one...
What I see right now is that Canadian angels, they're not really a risk taker. No. They're
Often-
actually risk
Yeah.
averse. So how come someone who writes a check for $5,000 and not taking risk can call themselves an angel?
You can't.
Right?
They can't and they shouldn't.
And
Well,
we
that's
as
a
an
Canadian-
entrepreneur, we are kind of spending time.
But this was, back to that point earlier, we only really started down this path in 2010. 2012, CDL and a couple others were born. 2015, it started happening in earnest. That's when you started to see Golden Financial and all those other VCs really start up, raise capital, and then we became a player in entrepreneurship and VC. So we're really young at this as a country, and that's the difference. When you talk to an American angel or an American VC, the conversation is so different. And again, it just depends. Where is the lion's share of your revenue going to come from? And if the answer is it's going to be south of the border, well, then there is an absolute, treasure trove of angels and VCs that are available, and who will understand and who will, because again, they've been at it for 20 to 30 to 40 years longer than some of the folks that you might be talking to here. So
maybe we can change a little bit the title. So you can be an angel only if you meet certain criteria, or you can say, or you can get some troubles if you call yourself an angel investor and you're actually not, right?
Yeah.
So I think this ecosystem, and that's great that we have this conversation. Sounds like we understand what we are talking about. And I think we need to be a little bit more proactive in building this ecosystem in this country, right? Because like the neighbor on the south, pretty successful. So why don't we take some examples from them? Don't have to go copy paste, but take some actions on that and just put some regulation around this angel.
there may not be any new regulation coming, but I do see Canada maturing. And we have now gone from really no unicorns to 15 or 20, like really serious companies that are going to be world dominant players.
But Canada's chances now in this recession, Canada's chances now to support businesses today and for the next couple of years, so that we don't just have these 15 unicorns that now are going international and they're not even being tied back
That's
to
where the
Canada.
maturity comes in, right? The capital now, there's more mature money. Like the people that took their money out of the last exit and the one before, those angels, they've been there, done that. They've been doing it for 7 years. So you can imagine that they've got accumulated. They've nicked themselves, they've burned themselves. So they've had some things go to zero, but they've also had some really successful exits if they invested in Marc's company and they've walked away with $1 million, right? So now they've got this new capital and they're like, okay, now I'm going to diversify that into 5 or 10 different companies, whatever. But they've got that wisdom that they didn't have 7 years ago. And so that's the difference. We're young, we're new, but we're getting way better and we're learning way faster because we also have the Valley to learn from. And we've got our accumulated wisdom here from all the accelerators, incubators, and all the well-meaning organizations like Innovation Guelph and others that are there to bring resources to all those entrepreneurs that are very, very worthy. Because at the outset I said, really great entrepreneurs, people who are huge risk takers. They're putting it all on the line, right? You're not getting compensated. If you are, it's not much compared to what you otherwise might be making in a full-time role at a major institution. That's a big bet in yourself. And you're creating tens of thousands of jobs. You're creating great revenue for the city, for the province, for the country. And you're creating wealth for all those families who you employ and a better quality of life for your clients, right? So, for nut-free products that wouldn't have existed had it not been for Brittany's innovation, right? So that's what I mean. Like, this is a really big deal, and I think it's something that people need to be very proud of. And it's not...
Maybe 15 unicorns, that's a great indicator of success or maturity. But not every company will become a unicorn, right? So, and we see some trends that investors stick to bigger pockets or bigger ideas rather than building this ecosystem of entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah.
So you know what, on that note, because you've talked about how many awesome entrepreneurs there are here, and they're doing really wonderful things. There's a whole bunch of them over in the other room. So I would like to say thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And to all of you, thank you very much for coming and having this conversation, and thank you for all of you for sitting here. We went a few minutes over, but not so bad. We've had some good chats. If you are not finished yet, please feel free to stick around and finish your lunch. But if you are ready to leave, then what we'll do is we can walk you through Platters Catering offices, and we'll walk you in the front door of the exhibition. It is in this building, but we'll leave and just Brittany does have a booth, so you can go and try some of her goodies. And Marc's book is coming out in February.
True
So,
founder, what nobody else has the guts to teach you about starting your first company, is all about being a first-time founder and dispelling a lot of the rosy myths and kind of really cutting into what it takes to be a successful first-time founder. So, yeah.
so look for that in
Shameless plug, appreciate
February. And Janice,
Just look for the Cert Clean certification on the products.
awesome.